knew that I was kind of getting some looks from affiliated teams. And then one day I get a call from my manager while I'm eating lunch at the apartment, getting ready to head to the stadium, basically saying, "Hey, pack your bags. The Twins just signed you. You're going down to Fort Myers."
All right, we are live with a very special guest today. I got to coach this specific person for a couple years in the Twins organization, Jackson Hicks, and he has a very unique story. And I really don't want to waste much time, but I want him to tell it from his personal experience. But I'll just start it off by saying he didn't play the traditional college baseball that you think of. He didn't play for an NCAA school. He didn't play junior college baseball, NAI. It's if you look him up, I mean, I didn't look up exactly, your stats, if there are stats for what you were doing, but you definitely aren't on Baseball Reference from a college stat standpoint. And you really don't see anything on Baseball Reference until, you're in independent ball, which we'll dive into that in a little bit. But why don't we just start by you starting from high school to where I want to say you were primarily a middle infielder, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Um,
So let's just jump in from there and to where you're at now.
all right. Yeah, it's been a quite a journey since then. Yeah, like you said, I was primarily a middle infielder, played shortstop, third base, pretty much my whole life, and was always very solid defensively. Like loved fielding ground balls, would take hundreds of ground balls with my dad, but hitting was a different animal. Once I got past like 12U and they started throwing curveballs and sliders and the velo started to climb, was a bit of a struggle. Was my first 2 years of high school was kind of up and down with the varsity team, mainly as a defensive replacement, coming in playing second base late in games or getting the occasional start here and there when one of the other primary middle infielders was on the mound. Um, and then junior year, finally got the chance to start every day as a shortstop and went and hit 150 over the course of about 2/3 of the season and immediately lost that job to the point where I was playing shortstop and getting DH'd for as a junior in high school, which is a pretty humbling experience. Not
Yeah, that's
not
tough.
at all. Yeah, not at all where you want to be. Have some interesting looking lineup cards from those days. Um, so yeah, like even back then though, like I always dreamed of playing professional baseball and wanted to continue my baseball career past high school and kind of saw the writing on the wall of like, hey, I'm a junior in high school, I'm hitting a buck 50. There's not a lot of opportunities for that at the next level. And like I said, I'd always been solid defensively, always had a pretty good arm. So finally convinced my high school coach one summer ball game. We had like 9 players, the classic high school summer league. I was like, hey, can I get off the mound for a couple innings today? He's like, fine. Well, we'll roll you out there. We'll see what you got. And went pretty well to the point where I was like, okay, this was pretty good for my first time being on a mound since I was 13 years old. And this is something I want to invest time and effort into. So I started working with a pitching coach in Chapel Hill, where I'm from, um, a couple times a month, and started to develop a little bit. But I was still pretty much just a shortstop throwing off the mound. Like pitching mechanics weren't great. Didn't really know what I was doing in terms of off speed pitches. I was just getting up there and kind of slinging it. And by the end of my senior year of high school, I was throwing like 81 to 83, top in 84, which again, not gonna elicit a ton of offers from big schools. And especially like I'd grown up in Chapel Hill. I was a huge UNC fan, always dreamed of going there. And once I got accepted to UNC, it was like, okay, this is where I'm going to go. And it's not like I have offers to play baseball anywhere else. So it wasn't really a decision whatsoever. So finish high school, get to Carolina, and there'd been a couple kids that I played summer ball with in high school, like American Legion ball, who had played on the club baseball team at Carolina. And I wanted my baseball career to keep going. I wasn't done after high school, and like this seems like a great opportunity to keep playing for another 4 years. I don't know how familiar people are with club baseball, but it's an entirely student-run organization. So we don't have any coaches. It's all like our head coach is the president that we elect the year before. pitching coach is usually one of the presidents or an upperclassman who's a pitcher. We practiced every day, but it was obviously classes came first, so it was only like people would come twice, maybe 3 times a week. Practices were on the turf intramural football field with a kind of beat up ratty cage. We had a portable mound, just a wood turf mound that got left outside year round, so it was completely destroyed. Um, so I'd mostly throw my bullpens off of there's like a little concrete slope going up to the shed where we kept our gear. So I'd throw most of my bullpens off of that, and we'd go out and play on the weekends against other club teams. So we did travel quite a bit from as far north as Maryland. Went to Florida, played Florida State every year. There were national rankings. There's a National Club Baseball Association. Not a lot of people know about that, but there's a World Series and national rankings and like All Americans and things like that for club ball too. Um, so we'd go out and play every weekend, and even throughout this time where we're playing, like Carolina, we actually had a nice club field. We played at the USA complex in Cary, but a lot of the places we played at were middle school fields, the local rec field in whatever city we were playing in. So even then, I still had dreams of playing professional baseball. And throughout my 4 years, like the stuff definitely got better. Spent a ton of time in the weight room, ton of time just in my room watching video of guys like Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole and trying to figure out what they did mechanically that I didn't do, and asking everyone I could talk to, like, hey, how do my mechanics look, and what should I be doing with my back leg and stuff like that. And by the time I got to my senior year, I had a start opening day down in Florida. It was at a local high school field. Threw all right and get off the mound after the game was done. We played doubleheader every Saturday, and the high school coach was there, and he like comes over to the dugout and he's like, "Hey man, do you know how hard you were throwing?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, didn't seem that hard. They were putting the ball in play, so it can't have been that good, right?" And it's like, "You were 90 to 92 all game." I'm like, holy cow! Like
Wow.
that's pretty solid. Like, I didn't know how hard I was throwing, but I'm like, okay, that kind of could open some doors after college. Getting over 90 was something I'd wanted to do my whole life, and it was cool to reach that goal. And then, like, my senior year was going really well. Had a start against either Central or Southern Florida. I always get confused, and threw a complete game after that. And then third start, threw a no hitter against NC State. And I'm like, okay, like things are going really well. Like maybe if I ball out during club ball, I could send stats or video to the nebulous scouts out there that I had
Yep.
no contacts, but like put it on the internet, see what happens. And of course, that was COVID year, so um, season completely shut down, everything stopped, and didn't get to finish the career or finish my college career the way I wanted to, and figured that that would probably be the end of my baseball career at that point. And after college, I got a job working for Habitat for Humanity, did a AmeriCorps service year, just building houses in Durham, just new construction, like the classic framing walls, putting it up, getting the floor system in, everything from start to finish with houses. And but even then, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I want to keep playing baseball. I remember vividly a conversation with my parents kind of towards the end of that service year where they're like, okay, like, got a couple months left at Habitat for Humanity. What do you want to do after? And the only thing I could think of is I want to try to play baseball and give that a shot. And throughout that whole time, I'd been going to the park by my house with a bucket of baseballs and some plyo balls and just hucking them into the fence as hard as I could for hours. Didn't know a lot about arm care or like velocity development at that point. Just go out there and like, okay, here's my 7 ounce plyo. We're gonna do 25 pull downs with that, and then we're gonna grab a 6 ounce plyo, and then like, okay, we're gonna move to a baseball and rip 20 more pull downs with that. And like the velo was still climbing, still in a pretty decent spot. And once I talked to my parents, they um, helped me out going to a place in Durham called Baseball Rebellion. They actually kind of know what they're doing, as opposed to, hey, go to the park and chuck balls into the fence as hard as you can. Um, had some really good coaches there, and they had some contacts in independent baseball and told me to just, hey, give it a shot, go out to these open tryouts. So I went to the Frontier League open tryout in Ohio and USPBL open tryout in Michigan, and got picked up by the Woolly Mammoths, West Side Woolly Mammoths in the
That's right.
United Shore
Represent.
Professional Baseball League. Yep, roll Mammoths. And um, yeah, I was there for a couple months and threw really well up there. Knew that I was kind of getting some looks from affiliated teams. And then one day I get a call from my manager while I'm eating lunch at the apartment, getting ready to head to the stadium, basically saying, hey, pack your bags. The Twins just signed you. You're going down to Fort Myers. And 48 hours later, there I was in the Fort Myers complex. And um,
And in my
yeah, and
presence.
spent, yep. Yeah, I think I met you. You were the first person who texted me on WhatsApp after I
Yep.
got signed. And like, hey, this is Jared. Looking forward to seeing you at the field tomorrow. And I remember my text was, where's the clubhouse? Like, where do I go? Because we hadn't,
Yeah.
all we'd been
Yeah.
able to do was sit at the hotel room because we still had the COVID
That's
restrictions.
right.
So you're like, just go to the big building and you'll find your way.
Yeah, very good instruction from a coach. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. And then yeah, spent the last back half of 2021, then all of 2022 and 2023 with the Twins. Good amount of time with you down in Fort Myers with the Muscles, and then ended 2023 in Cedar Rapids, and then up to now blew out my elbow December of last year, so I've been rehabbing from Tommy John all year, and that takes us to today.
Yeah, what a wild ride. Like there's so much to unpack. I want to try to figure out where I want to start. The first thing that came
Yeah,
to mind was when I was thinking about club ball when you were playing there. Like you obviously were a very serious player. Like despite it being club baseball, like you were probably working harder and doing more things than some of the players for the main UNC team, right? So like what was that like being around other kids that maybe were just there just to kind of have fun, a couple days a week or play a couple games on the weekend? Like did people give you a hard time, or was there a lot of like other players that were trying to work as hard as you?
um, a little bit of both. There were a few who were really hard workers, go out and get it, take it super seriously, super competitive. And then there were a lot of guys that were, it's club baseball. We're going to
Yeah.
use it as an excuse to, hey, we're going to go down to Florida State and party in Tallahassee for a weekend. We're going to go down to Gainesville and party in Gainesville, and not taking it super seriously. But I kind of decided after high school that, like, if I was going to be like have this kind of crazy journey and be different, like I'd have to be different in everything that I did. Because like my biggest regret from high school is I took a weightlifting class my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Because I mean I was small. Like my
Yeah.
sophomore year of high school, I was like 5'7", like buck 30, buck 40.
Okay.
And then graduated, I was like 6'3", 165 pounds, maybe 170 pounds.
So you grew a
And
lot.
yeah, but I didn't put on a lot of muscle. And I had 180 days of school times every day for 3 years, had an hour of weightlifting class, and I just wasted it. Like, played basketball with my friends, played dodgeball with my friends, just kind of hung out in the weight room. Occasionally would like go through the motions of like a bench day, or like do some stuff with the cable machine with like tricep extensions, or like hammer out some
Right.
bicep curls. Just because I was like afraid to be different and afraid to be like the
Mm.
guy that is like, oh, like this guy is doing these, like, you know how baseball lifts are, like they draw a lot of attention to
Oh yeah,
yourself,
yeah.
like
There's certain
yeah,
movements you're doing. If you're in a public gym, it's
yeah,
like, what is that guy doing over
yeah,
there?
exactly, like you're slamming med balls, you're doing all sorts of rotational stuff, and it just like I just didn't want to be the guy like showing up to my fifth period French class sweating, and
Yeah.
like just like I was just afraid of standing out. And kind of like once I graduated from high school and thought that my baseball career was over, kind of coming face to face with the end of my baseball career, the end of my dream, like, okay, like if I want to do this, I have to actually go out and do it and like work every day to get towards it, regardless of if I'm standing out or if I'm ruffling feathers on the club team, because I'm
Right.
treating every single game like game 7 of the World Series.
Yep.
And like I absolutely went out and did that. And like every day I was at the student rec center at 6 in the morning when it opened until like 8:30 or 9 when I had to eventually go to class. And I was doing the like slamming the med balls. I was asking people to move out of my way on the turf area so I could push and pull the sled. I was doing like heavy reverse lunges and stuff. And it's like, I want to be different and I'm going to take a different approach and go out there and do all that I can to reach my goals. And I took the same approach with being on the club team. Like without a coach, it's hard to hold guys accountable. And
Right.
especially with like getting a catcher, like a lot of guys just don't want to catch bullpens, especially
Yeah.
like I said, with the like going out and hucking balls into the fence, like 100 pull downs. I didn't really have a lot of moderation, and I'd want to go out and throw like a 65 pitch bullpen where I'm like really working on my slider and I'm bouncing it, and a lot of guys are like, "Come on, man! Like you just threw a bullpen last week. Like, do you really need to throw another
Last week.
bullpen?"
Yeah, not really.
and
It's yeah, like every 3 days after you pitch, or I don't know what the
yeah,
schedule is, but you're pitching once a week. You're touching the mound for a bullpen at least once.
yeah, and I try to get off the mound like 3 times a week in
So you're pushing
college.
it.
And
You're pushing it a little bit.
I was 100% throwing too much, but I mean, you saw me for 2 years, and
Yeah, you
like,
know.
yeah, yeah, the number of times that you and Richard had to stop me and AJ or me and Ward from throwing,
Yeah.
like, okay, that's enough throws. It was the same way, but to an extreme in college,
Right.
and that definitely ruffled feathers, and especially by the time I was a senior and I was the president of the team and was making the lineup, and I want to go out there and win every game. So I like opening night benched guys who'd been starters for 3 years because they hadn't been coming to practice or like showed up late to the field, and got the like, what the hell, man, it's club ball, why are we taking this so seriously? And
Right.
it was just kind of had to put like my goals ahead of like friendships that I'd had, which was definitely difficult to do, but worth it in the end.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive that you did that with those being your friends and your peers. I mean, the same age of guys in your bench, and
Mm-hmm.
that's probably kind of an awkward, uncomfortable situation to be in.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to stay on the college aspect for a second, but I do want to go back to high school after this. I'm just thinking, you're making these velocity gains, you're working hard. Like at any point, did you have a thought to actually try to walk on for the main team at UNC, or is that not really an option? Or like, what was that relationship like with the main team?
We didn't really have a much of a relationship with the main team. Occasionally we'd get hand-me-down gear.
Okay.
Like when I graduated in 2020, we had bats from the like 2013 College World Series team, which is kind of sick 'cause it had the Omaha logo on it and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And the year before I got there, one of the kids got called up to be the bullpen catcher of the main team. But there wasn't a lot of interaction between the club team and the um, main team. And like my first year still wasn't, I was still basically shortstop, hadn't made a lot of velo gains on the mound, didn't go great. Sophomore year threw really well, had a really good year. Then end of the year started having a little bit of elbow problems, and then was studying abroad in France that summer.
Mm,
So didn't really have a chance to train over the summer or throw at
yeah.
all. And then junior year again had another good season, and by that point I'd been playing on the team for 3 years, was elected president of the team, was living with 5 of my teammates, and um, kind of decided I'd rather play another year with my friends and try to have a great club season, win a club national championship, rather than um, probably be in best case scenario towards the end of the bullpen on the
Yeah.
varsity team and trying to walk on. So the answer is no. I never really never at all reached out, and I do kind of regret that because it was partially born out of the fear that they'd tell me
Mm,
no, like you're not
right.
good enough, and then
Yep.
the dream would be shattered. Um, so like at a certain point though, I did have to put myself out there going out to the independent league tryouts.
Right.
But I wouldn't change my college career. I had a great time with the club team. Some of those guys are still my closest friends and talk all the time. And it was a really fun and rewarding experience and learned a lot just beyond the baseball field in terms of like being the president of the team and all the logistics and management and leadership skills that I got from that.
Yeah, you were probably 1 year away, it sounds like, from maybe really having an opportunity to pitch a lot for
Yeah.
UNC, like, because you're 90-92 your senior year. So it's like if that's 1 year prior, maybe that changes things. If you're in the low 90s, maybe touching a
Yeah.
3 or a 4 that summer. And now it's okay, I got a legitimate shot at being able to pitch for these guys.
Yeah. And also like off speed pitches were not much to speak of at that
Okay.
point. I
Yeah.
mean, like it, I was very much able to just throw fastballs probably 95% of the time in my
Yep.
club ball starts and have a lot of success doing that. So I had kind of a loopy breaking pitch and a splitter that occasionally would be really good and then occasionally would throw it 40 feet and or throw it to the backstop over the catcher's head.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it just wasn't nearly as polished as it probably would have taken to be on the varsity team at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to go back to high school for a second because you said you were like
Yeah.
83, 84. Is that right? Or maybe I read that. Maybe you didn't say that. But were you around
Yeah.
low 80s your senior year?
Yeah, as far as I know, there was only one time I got a gun on me. So, and it was tweeted out and I was tagged in it. And that's the
Yeah,
only thing
yeah.
I know. It's said I was 81 to 83, top in 84. So I
Okay.
think that's probably about where I was for that whole year.
Right. And you pitched well from what I understand, like just seeing your stats and whatnot. Like it seemed like you pitched well. Yeah, you weren't throwing super hard and you're right-handed, but like was there ever a thought to go to a junior college or go to a smaller school? Or was it kind of like I'm from Chapel Hill. I love UNC. Like I got accepted here. I'm just going to kind of go here. And at that point, the decision was kind of moving on from baseball because you didn't have the baseball club. You didn't know about that immediately, correct?
Yeah. Like I kind of knew about the club baseball team my senior year of high school, but I kind of, at that point, when I was still playing, I thought like playing real high school ball, I thought like, oh, I wouldn't want to just play at not a high level. Like if I'm gonna play, I want to play at a like real college baseball was kind of the thought. And then once I went through a summer without playing baseball for the first time in my life, I'm like, no,
Never
I'm
mind.
playing baseball anyway, any way that
Yeah.
I can. And as far as like JUCOs and community colleges go, I didn't really know a lot about junior colleges and
Okay.
community colleges. I got followed on Twitter by the coach of Patrick Henry Community College, and that was as far as that went. That was as much as I knew about community colleges at that
Yeah.
point. Um, and yeah, like once I got accepted to Carolina, um, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. Like I said, I was a huge UNC fan, had dreamed of going there since I was like 8 or 9 years old. Even living in Denver before I moved out to North Carolina, I always wanted to be a Tar Heel, and like you can't argue with the education that UNC has. And like my thought was, I'm probably as much as I want to play professional baseball, the odds are so stacked against me at this point that it better serves me to get the education that UNC has to offer and come away with that 4 year degree to set me up for life after college than um, try to go somewhere else just to play baseball.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, just kind of circling back to some of the things you said earlier, like specifically about the weight room in high school, like didn't really take it
Yeah.
seriously. And it sounded like that was kind of a regret. You wish you would have taken advantage of that
Yeah.
time. And then moving forward into college, it sounded like the switch turned on where it was like, you know what? I don't care if this is club baseball. Like I want to be as good as I possibly can. I'm going to do whatever it takes in my training. I'm just gonna treat it like it's, like you said, Game 7 of the World Series every time I take the mound. And I've seen that since I've known you, back in 2021. Like, you've always been one of the hardest workers, if not the hardest worker, that I've coached. And it just seems like you just have that relentless mindset that it doesn't matter,
Hmm.
if you pitch bad the night before, you pitch great, your attitude and your work ethic wasn't going to waver the next day. You were just very consistent with your process, and my experience with you. Like, where does that come from? Like, is it just like that was kind of like the way you were raised? Is it just you learned through some, through some challenges like high school and realizing that you weren't living up to your potential? Or like, where does that drive come from for you?
I do think a lot of it comes from my parents, and just like we're naturally very competitive family. Like our family card games get very cutthroat, and some like my mom will probably get mad at me for saying this, but like there's been some very like words that you would not expect to come out of my mom's mouth from these happen during these card games. And like I've always just had this super competitive drive with everything that I do, wanting to win and be as good as I can. And like I always thought of myself as a very hard worker, and like in the mandatory baseball workouts, I was the same way. I was always the hardest worker there, one of the hardest workers there. I just wasn't doing the extra stuff in high school, like the weight room class. It wasn't it wasn't like there wasn't direction. It was just kind of like we went in the weight room and were able to do whatever we wanted, and
Okay.
there's not a lot of supervision. So kind of once I decided that I'm gonna treat club ball and take it as seriously as I can, I started to take that work ethic beyond just the practices, the stuff I was doing with the team, and do it in everything. And then like once I got to pro ball, having that kind of chip on my shoulder from being a club baseball guy, and not having the kind of pedigree that a lot of the guys had who like played with guys who won national championships, guys who played on ESPN for years that I've been watching playing in college, and definitely had a bit of a chip on my shoulder knowing that like I'm on the like I've accomplished a good amount by just getting to be on the same field as these guys, but now I want to not just share the field with them. I want to beat them. And like my biggest edge is to outwork them because I'm not the most naturally gifted guy, not the most athletic person you'll see. So I just figured that my edge was going to be outworking them. And like you said, being consistent day in and day out and trying to improve and get better each and every day. Because over the course of 120 game season, that's a lot of opportunities for growth.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, when you first got to, professional baseball, there's probably a little bit of an intimidation factor, especially
Yeah.
because you didn't have the college route that a lot of kids had. But then I'm sure shortly after when you got there, you realize everyone's the same, right? Everyone is in the exact same
Yeah.
spot. Like, you are in the exact same spot as AJ Labus, for example, who played at
Yeah.
LSU. You're at the exact same spot as Pearson Knoll, who played at Grand Canyon, or
Yeah.
all these other schools, and you're all at the same spot. It doesn't matter where you were before that. That may have helped you get to where you are now, but at this point in time, you are all on the same level playing field. And I'm sure looking back on it, it's easier now to realize that. But in that moment, I'm sure there was a little bit of anxiety and questioning whether you belonged or not. I'm assuming just based off
Oh
of
yeah.
our conversations. But how do you think you navigated through that? Because I assume that probably made you work even harder or motivated you to prove yourself in a way. But like, how did you put away the fear or the anxiety and allow yourself just to perform like you were capable of?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely difficult at first. The person that always comes to mind is Jake Rucker, because I'd seen him play in the Little League World Series when he was 12 years old on ESPN, and then watched him play for 3 years at Tennessee. And um, like that was kind of crazy to see him. And then once I got called up to the muscles, my first start, the second batter of the game was Jason Dominguez, who I'd been playing with on MLB The Show all year. And um, like the scouting report that I got for him, it was like player comps were like Mickey Mantle and like guys like that. it was definitely very intimidating early on. I'm like, oh man, I have to be like perfect with all my pitches. I have to like if I like miss over the heart of the plate at all, I have to like hit the corners perfectly and um like definitely struggled with that a little bit and had to like I definitely spent a lot of time working with the Twins mental performance coaches. Omar, I don't know if you remember him. He
Yeah,
was really good, helped me a lot, kind of helping me get the perspective, like you said, of like we're all at the same level now, and like there's a reason that I'm here, and like if anything, I had to be better than the other guys in independent baseball to even get this opportunity because of the kind of stigma associated with a guy that doesn't have any stats on baseball reference and
right.
didn't play an inning of college baseball. And it really wasn't until May of my first full year with the Muscles that I started to kind of come around a little bit. I don't know if you remember, I had a absolute blow up outing against Clearwater early in the week, gave up 5 runs in 2/3 of an inning, and then
Vaguely.
came in. Yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of baseball games.
yeah. It wasn't my only blow up outing, uh, and then came in Sunday and had like tweaked my back in the weight room earlier that week, and like just wasn't feeling good. Had horrible feel for the slider that I was trying to throw at the time. Like was throwing it 40 feet. Was like had no feel for the splitter, and it was just nothing but fastballs. And went 3 up, 3 down both innings that I pitched. Struck out Mickey Moniak, who was rehabbing and had played in the big leagues at that point, former number 1 overall pick. And I'm like, man, if I can do this just with a fastball, feeling terrible with no off speed pitches and still
Hmm.
get guys out, like we can do this. And then that gave me a lot of confidence to start trusting my stuff more and like, okay, I don't have to be super fine. I can just go out there and compete and not have to worry about, am I good enough? Can I get these guys out? Like I can just go out there and throw and compete.
For sure. I feel like it takes moments like that to where you get, a former big league, or not former, he's currently in the big leagues too, but you get a big
Yeah.
league caliber type player out, or someone that you think is just far and above, whether it's Jason Dominguez or some of these other guys, and you have success. And now you're able to put that in the back of your mind, and you're able to use that later down the road when maybe you start struggling again. You can reflect on that and remind yourself that I got that guy out when I didn't even feel my best. Like, surely I can get this
Yeah.
guy out right now when I'm feeling good. And, one of my favorite guys I like to read about and follow is David Goggins. I don't know if you've read a lot of his
Yeah.
stuff or not, but he has a thing called the cookie jar that he does. And basically, what it is it's a mental cookie jar of where you write down all of your failures and all of your successes that have come after that, ways that you have overcome struggles in the past. So maybe it's you didn't get any offers to play college baseball, and then you turn that into a positive or into a success by having a really successful club baseball career. You ended up, not having an opportunity to get drafted by an organization right away, but you turned that into a positive and found success by getting to independent ball. And then just you can build on these different scenarios and show yourself times where you have overcome obstacles in your life, or failures, and have turned them into successes and have been able to move on to bigger and greater things. And the more of those that you have, the more options you have to reflect on that can kind of remotivate yourself and remind yourself of really how amazing you are, and in a to put it bluntly, of just like all the successes and how good you actually are. And I think a lot of baseball players need that, because at some point in baseball, whether you're a hitter or a pitcher, you're going to fail. Like, that's just, it's a game of failure regardless. You're going to struggle, you're going to hit a roadblock at some point. And really, the ones that turn into really good players are the ones that are able to turn that into a positive and are able to use that as fuel to learn from it and become a better player, which I think you have done a phenomenal job of. Like, whether it's even just a minor setback of having a bad game, like you said, coming back later that week, still not feeling your best, and you're still able to have success because you're able to turn the page and focus on the task at hand and use what you had that day. In that same vein, especially in pro baseball and with the Twins specifically, we were pretty analytical. We would share a lot of information with you guys, whether it be, your pitch movement stuff, your performance stats. All of you guys would have specific goals that we are working towards. For some players, it was probably overwhelming. There's a lot of a lot of different things that we were trying to work on to improve for you guys. I know for you, you're a very smart guy, which is good, but sometimes that can cause people to overthink things or to go down rabbit holes that they don't need to be going down. Like for you personally, how do you balance, that side of things of being educated and understanding who you are and what everything means from an analytical standpoint, while also just pitching carefree and trusting the stuff that you have? Like how does that balance out for you?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a kind of a tough balance to strike because, like you said, I try to soak up as much information as I can. There were definitely times where you or Bobby or Richard or someone had to be like, "Hey, let's not worry too much about these random squiggly lines on the Kinetrax or Simi or whatever motion capture system that we had." But I think the main thing that helped me was kind of separating early work and games. So like the early work was the time to work on stuff. It was the time to get off the mound and throw 6 or 8 changeups to try to work on that pitch, or time to do a bunch of drills with the 3D strap or the hurdle to work on my lead leg block, or do sandbag work to work on my hinge. And then like once it gets to game time, like once my name's called in the bullpen, I get off the mound to start warming up, just trusting all the like hours and hours of work that we put in before the games, trusting that that would translate, and just shifting the focus from internal, like feeling my mechanics or trying to feel a certain thing with the ball coming out of my hand if I was working on a certain pitch, and instead just focusing on how aggressive can I be through a spot on the catcher, like pick a like his mask if I was throwing a fastball, or maybe like right shoulder if I was throwing the changeup, just thinking how aggressive can I be with this pitch, and doing my best to just trust it and throw it with complete conviction. And obviously, like there were plenty of times where that didn't happen completely seamlessly, and got caught up a little bit in the like, especially with working on the changeup
Mm-hmm.
so much last year. Getting into games, like I'd have a lot of conviction with my fastball and slider, and then time would come to throw a changeup, and it would the mental focus would shift more towards like, okay, let's try to create the right movement on this pitch rather
Yeah.
than let's try to go out and execute this pitch as well as I can. So I think now kind of having the perspective of being away from it for a year and seeing, like looking back on my approach and what I was doing then, I would try to focus a lot less on that with the changeup and just focus on who cares if it's 17 VB on this changeup. I'm just going to
Yeah.
throw it with as much conviction as I can, try to throw it through the catcher. But yeah, the main thing is just trying to flip the switch when you cross that line onto the field, and it goes from I'm not trying to develop, I'm not trying to work on anything, I'm trying to go and get the hitter out and help my team win this game.
Yeah, and it's really hard, especially in minor league baseball, because it is about development. But at the same
Yeah.
time, if you don't pitch well, then you're probably
Yeah.
not going to move up. So it's like you can't fully tell me that it's purely about development when my performance is kind of dictating some of these decisions on getting called up. So, and I've struggled with that from the coaching side of, how I would communicate that with you guys, because it was a really tough balance. Because your changeup, for example, we wanted to kill the vertical break on it, and obviously ultimately have it be, located well. But it's almost like you would execute one, but if it wasn't at the vertical break that we wanted, it was quote unquote a bad pitch, or it wasn't what
Yeah.
we wanted. And it's tough. And you can't, if that's the case, you can't help but be thinking on the mound about, okay, is it coming off my fingers just right? Because I know I need to get this to 5 VB or whatever it is. Then you end up, sailing it or spiking it. And then that's not good, regardless of what the movement is. So I'm just reflecting out loud, just as a coach,
Yeah.
of that balance of communicating what we're actually working on the development side of things, as well as, building confidence and trust to where we are, working on execution, because at the end of the day, you have to be able to execute what you have.
Yeah. And it's definitely tough too as a reliever because you get such limited number of pitches, and like especially like coming in late in a game, say it's like extra innings, there's a guy on second, and like I know I need to throw my changeup to get reps in games, but do I really want to throw a changeup in this
Right.
spot and risk bouncing it and the guy getting to third, or risk wild pitching a guy in when I know that I can strike this guy out using solely fastball slider? So it's definitely a tough
Yeah.
balance to strike.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to, I don't want to say predetermined, but kind of predetermined, because we would do that sometimes. Like, hey, if you get to 0-1 count right here, or all 0-1 counts, you're throwing a change up here. And sometimes you have to do that when you're developing things. But I think if you do that for too long of a period of time, that's probably not for the best. But like if a kid is purely just not throwing the pitch that he needs to work on, and it's going to ultimately lead to success down the road, maybe you have to have an intervention as far as getting the usage up. But as far as, thinking about how it's moving and all of those things, it's definitely something that you have to be careful with as a coach. And it's, I always enjoy conversations with you because you're a very honest person about how you're interpreting things that I'm saying, or the pulse of the team of how they're interpreting the way, we're sending our messages. And I always appreciated that about you. But let's, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let's dive in a little bit to where you're at now, because, obviously you're rehabbing from TJ. Why don't we talk about, some of the things that you were doing prior to TJ? Because I know you were making some really good improvements. You were gaining velocity. Like, what were, I'm kind of getting sidetracked now from the injury. This doesn't have to do with the injury, but like, what do you think are like 2 to 3 things that you've done over the past few years that have been really instrumental in helping your velocity?
Um, I think the main thing is just like the drill work that we did and like actually understanding how to use plyo balls. Cause like I said, when I got my first set of plyo balls in like 2018 when they were popping off because I saw people on Instagram throwing them and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing with them. I'd just take them and throw them as hard as I could at the wall and be like, okay, that was a good plyo day with no understanding of what I was supposed to be feeling or doing with them. So like once I got to the twins and kind of understood that the plyos ideally will add velocity not by throwing them hard, but by helping ingrain good patterns and just helping you feel yourself moving the right way. That was kind of a big aha moment of like when I first got signed with the Twins, the main focus was cleaning up the arm path and
Mm-hmm.
just getting to that 90-degree position at foot strike and not having weird hitches and getting stuck with my arm straight out behind me. And I was like, oh, I can feel it a lot better with a heavier ball because I'm more aware of where my hand is in space. And then kind of took the same approach with working on like my lead leg block and rotation of like we're going to do some very heavily constrained drills of roll ins or step backs where I'm focusing solely on one thing and just the plyo ball is going to kind of help me be more aware of how my body's moving in space. That was probably the biggest thing that helped me gain velocity throughout my time with the Twins. And then just generally more structured drill work of getting off the mound with you or Richard with like the 3D strap to help me feel my hips rotating correctly, or putting the hurdle in front of my left leg to just as a visual cue to land and stick it and pull back with the lead leg. Just stuff like that to help kind of clean up mechanics and just get a better I also just got a better understanding of what pitching mechanics are supposed to look like from working with you guys. Cause I had Patrick Curran was my pitching coach in Chapel Hill. He played minor league baseball, was really good, but I only saw him a couple times a month for maybe a year. And then for 4 years in college, wasn't working with the pitching coach and
Yeah.
had a couple months with the guys at Baseball Rebellion who were really good, but didn't really have enough time to work on stuff because we were trying to build up for the independent league tryouts. So like when I got to the Twins, I never really had a real pitching coach. Like I'd kind of just taught myself how to do stuff, and the way that things felt to me were not the way they looked. In, and like ideas that I had weren't necessarily correct with how my body should be moving, and I just gained a much better understanding of how I should be feeling and the right way to move, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like you gained a lot of awareness over the last couple of years, like just
Yeah.
really getting in tune with who you are. Like you said, like the feel versus real of what you thought you were doing or what you should
Yeah.
be doing. That probably changed once you were able to get more feedback. As obviously with the Twins, we had 2 pitching coaches at every affiliate. Like there wasn't a
Yeah.
shortage of feedback, so I'm sure that helps gain your, your awareness and your feel. And then with the work ethic that you have and the reps that you're going to take seriously with that, like it makes perfect sense why your development over these last 3 years has been amazing. Let's now move in a little bit to rehab and that process, because that's a completely different animal. I had
Yeah.
TJ back in 2018. Ended up not playing again after that, so I can't speak to that part of it, but I can connect with you on the rehab process and what that's like. But where are you currently at? Like, how far out are you from surgery right now?
I had surgery on February 26th of this year, so almost, what month are we in? September? Almost 7 months out of surgery.
Yep.
So deep into the throwing program right now, building up. Hopefully, get off the mound in the next 2 or 3 weeks for the first time. Started throwing flat grounds a couple weeks ago, so definitely in the thick of it right now. Like starting to have the velo climbing back up, starting to throw with a little bit more intensity, which is both fun and scary at the same time.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm excited to get back on a mound and start throwing off speed pitches again, but also trying not to take it too fast and get ahead of myself.
for sure. Yeah, you got to be patient without a doubt. But like, what has been the biggest challenge you think for you to this point? And maybe it's physical, maybe it's mental, but like, what's been some of the bigger hurdles that you've had to overcome these first 7 months?
By far, the biggest challenge has just been being away from the game and being away from like the other guys. Um, like as you know, the Twins cut me the day I had surgery, and so I'm out in Arizona. Didn't really know anyone out here other than you. Um, and like the hardest part's been watching now guys like my good friends going through a full season and watching them get to be out there and play while I'm struggling with like the 3 pound weights that you use in the early part of rehab and struggling to get the range of motion back and fighting to hit 72 miles an hour on the radar gun throwing and talking to them and like the just missing all the time you spend in the clubhouse and the friendships that you have and just going through the ups and downs of a minor league season, the stuff that you kind of take for granted or don't appreciate. Just like the like this is gonna sound crazy, but like I miss the Randalays and Fort Myers when we're just sitting in there playing cards for hours and like I just miss that kind of camaraderie and
Yeah.
being part of a team.
No, that makes perfect sense. Like, that's a large part of the professional season, just the bonds you build with your teammates, and
Yeah,
having to watch that from afar, I'm sure is challenging, especially seeing some of those guys you played with getting called up to AAA, and even some of them making their big league
yeah,
debuts this year, like Zebby and Festa, which has been really
yeah.
cool to see. But I'm sure it's tough just to be sitting at home watching that.
Yeah, like obviously I'm super happy for that. And exciting for me to also like, man, I shared a clubhouse with that guy last year, and now he's pitching important innings for the Twins in the like maybe playoff stretch for him if they can hang on to their lead in the wild card.
Yeah, for sure. What have
Yeah,
been some of the mental hurdles? Because obviously that's a huge part of TJ, is like building the trust and the confidence again to let the ball go. Like, I know you're not at max effort yet, but like, how has the throwing been from the mental side of things?
um, it's been easier than I thought so far. Knock on wood to kind of let it go. And like I've got really good rehab here at Conti Sports Performance. He's been with the Dodgers for a long time. Like he knows what he's doing. It's not his first rodeo at all with TJ's. So I've got a lot of trust in him, knowing that he's doing everything that he can to put my arm in a good spot, and that he wouldn't ask me to do something that my arm's not capable of at a certain point in the rehab. And then like the main focus has just been looking at it as kind of an opportunity of like at the very least, like if rehab goes perfectly and perfectly smoothly, it's a 12-month process, which is still 365 days where you can work on all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't be able to work on in season because like I don't have to go out and worry about like, oh, is my arm okay to pitch today? And like, oh, I can't really try to make a big mechanical change because I need to feel comfortable to go out and compete on the mound today. So it's been nice to kind of take a step back and look at what could I have done better to maybe prevent the injury or at the very least like help me move better and put less strain on my arm and potentially throw harder when I come back. And like I feel like I've made a lot of gains in just generally how I move, like my physical fitness level overall, like able to use my hips better, and just kind of taking it day by day in terms of like, let's try to find something to get better at today. And then you stack those bricks over the course of 365 days, you can make pretty big improvements.
Yeah, 100%. Like that is if you want to look at it as an advantage, that is the advantage, is like you can purely
Yeah.
focus on remapping whatever you need to remap from a delivery standpoint and literally start from scratch, teach yourself how to throw. That's what I
Yeah.
did when I came back from surgery. Like I didn't use my lower half well at all. And like that was purely my focus, was as I'm building up and going slow, I'm going to spend all of these reps focusing on doing it exactly right with my lower half, because I don't have to worry about going 100% effort and I don't have to worry about pitching in a game. So there's no reason not to sell out for focusing on whatever that area is that you think you need to. I mean, this is a tough question because, and you might not have the
Yeah.
answer, but what do you think are the things that possibly led to your injury? Is there anything that sticks out that maybe you would have done differently? Minus ripping the balls years ago for hundreds of reps.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing, is just overall workload management, and just throwing heavy balls as hard as I could probably wasn't the best move. Because I'm like, I know from what my surgeon told me that there'd been partial tears for a while. Like, I don't know how long, if I'd been pitching with it 1 year, 2 years,
Mhm.
but it was kind of only a matter of time before it gave out, the UCL. Because like the one that I felt it on, I was like warming up at like 75 feet, 70% effort, and felt it go. So it wasn't like I
Wow.
was doing crazy stuff. And that kind of says to me that it was only a matter of time. And if it wasn't that throw, it might have been a week later, it might have been in February, or might have been midway through this season, but it was probably only a matter of time. And I think a lot of it was that, like, heavy workload with bad mechanics. Like, not to say that my mechanics are anywhere near perfect now, but like from when I got to the Twins to where they were at the end of last season, it was a pretty significant change in terms of arm path and just
Right.
using my lower body and rotating better. So I know I was putting a lot of strain on my arm early in my career with the Twins, which was when, and that those were my mechanics when I was going to the park and throwing the ball as hard as I could.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that was probably the main thing. And just, I think now the focus is like using my lower half a lot better, like you said, figuring out how to rotate the correct way, because I've always struggled with the idea of like rotate and just spin and fly out instead
Right.
of like rotating towards home plate, um, and just clean up the arm path even more. And um, hopefully that puts the elbow in a spot where it's protected. And obviously, with all the strengthening of the forearm and the shoulder and the muscles around the elbow to protect the UCL, hopefully it'll be in a good spot once I start going max effort again.
Yeah, it's great. So you're month 7 right now. Like you said, if everything goes perfectly, a year is about the timeline. What are the next steps for you, or what are you looking ahead to here in these next, few months, as far as working out for teams or doing some pro days? Like what's kind of on your radar in regards to that?
Yeah, that's absolutely the focus, is trying to get game ready by February of next year, and hopefully be doing some pro days then and throwing for teams, and ideally get picked up for spring training. Worst comes to worst and don't get picked up, plan on going and playing indie ball.
Yep.
Had some funny texts the day after I had surgery, because all the indie ball teams are looking through the transactions pages and see Jackson Hicks released by the Twins. And obviously they don't know that I had TJ the day before. So I got texts from 4 or 5 indie ball coaches saying like, hey, just reaching out. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if you're interested in playing indie ball. Like, if you want to come pitch for us this summer. I'm like sitting there in my brace at the airport. Like, yeah, I think it's going to be tough this year,
I mean,
but
unless you need a lefty that doesn't throw
yeah,
very well.
yeah, yeah. If you want a guy like a vibes guy in the clubhouse, you can.
do the rehab. I mean, a couple months from now, I'll be able to roll out and throw like mid 50s. So
Yeah, yeah.
if you're looking for that, I'm your guy. But otherwise, maybe we'll get in touch next year. So yeah, if I don't get picked up by an affiliate team, plan on going back to indie ball and hopefully throwing well there again and getting signed again.
Perfect. Well, I'll obviously be with you on that process with us both being in
Yeah,
Arizona. We'll set up some stuff once you're 100% and make sure you get some eyes on you and see what happens.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's
Perfect.
going to
Well,
be an
Jackson,
exciting time.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, dude, and just sharing your story. Like I learned a lot about you that I didn't fully know, and it's cool just to hear your story from high school with essentially no offers, really not a huge future. At least it didn't seem like a huge future in baseball to where you are now. I think it's very inspiring for a lot of listeners. There's definitely a lot of high school kids that listen to the show or high school coaches that I think this can be used as inspiration for a lot of players, and and I think an important note to your work ethic and the way you are is like inspiration, motivation is great. Like they're going to hear this story and they're going to say, yeah, that sounds awesome. But now they have to do what you did and they have to put in the work to ultimately get to where they want to go. So hopefully they got that message.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is to keep betting on yourself, even when like it seems crazy and your club ball teammates are telling you like, why are we taking this so seriously? Like, don't
Yep.
be afraid to be different. And then the other takeaway, whenever I talk to high school kids and like they're talking about college recruiting and stuff, is like I'll tell them to go somewhere where they can play because
Hmm.
like over my 4 years of college, I threw a couple hundred innings and was pitching every weekend in games. And like, yeah, they
Right.
weren't televised games, they weren't attended by any scouts by any means, but I got thousands of reps where I'm facing a batter in the box and learning how to pitch. And
Yep.
I think a lot of kids have that focus of D1 or bust. And
Yep.
if you sit on the bench for 3 years at the D1, you're missing out on a ton of opportunities for growth in game.
For sure. Or if you have to transfer 3 different times, that's not
Yeah,
fun
that
either.
too. Yeah.
Which nowadays that's usually the way it goes.
Yeah. It's pretty typical now, apparently.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Jackson. Really appreciate your time and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Jared.